Okay, great. All right, welcome to another huddle where we tackle the practical aspects of real estate. We get right down into it. Here we go. So today we're talking about handling objections post NAR settlement changes. At this point, we all have addendas for old buyer broker agreements and old listing agreements out. We have new listing agreement forms for new listings. We have new buyer broker agreements. So, hey, we're right in the thick of it, right? So, welcome to the boat. Yeah, grab on, hold on. There's more rapids to come. So, how is everybody? You surviving? You doing good? Yeah. Well, don't everybody speak at once. I mean, can't understand you when you do that. You gotta love Zoom.
That's relevant if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a buyer broker with somebody that I can't get hold of, and they told my colleague that they're no longer in the state. Do I need to keep trying to hassle them down or go ahead and send that? Or because we're not working on anything right now. They've decided they've moved out of state.
Well, yeah, I would say if you're not actively working with the buyer, meaning they're not available to even see a property, then the need for that updated piece is going to be difficult if they're not responding. If they
Do I
reach out to you and say, "Hey, let's go see this property," then get it signed before you're able to do it. But yeah, if you can't get a hold of them, then you're not going to be able to get anything signed, and it won't apply since you're not showing them the property.
Thank you.
Sorry,
No,
Will.
yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for doing that. I had to grab one more stack of documents here to show. So here's kind of the outline for today, if you can see that. Just if it's okay, yeah, that's a lot to cover, right? So let's start off with a couple objectives of today. Just a reminder that with all this change going on in the industry, it's right now that agents are feeling, I'm talking industry wide here, and particularly in our state, our competition's feeling the pressure. They don't have the guidance and the training that we're fortunate to have at Brookshire. So take some solace and some comfort in knowing that we've got a big team and a big family around us, and we're getting the best guidance that we can have and the best guidance that's in the industry. So with that, remember that there's probably going to be you're probably going to hear some agents getting out of the business. So stay in the boat and hold on for a while. It's gonna get easier soon, but right now it's gonna be pretty tough. Uh, Next point is this is an objective, I think, for all of us to have a mindset that we become the master of these changes. Make sure that you have your elevator simplification description of why we had the changes, why the forms needed to change, and make sure you've got that down. Okay. The agents who become a master of utilizing the changes in the market are going to really thrive and be able to have confidence with their buyers and sellers. Another thing, point number 3, is what we say and how we say it really matters. So when you're overcoming objections with anybody in any sales process, how you say it and what you say really matters. So I'm hoping to adjust a few words I've already heard already as we kind of nail down some scripting on some responses to better the words we use. Before I get into my first objection, would anybody like to share any kind of pushback or objection that they're hearing already to any of these changes, new addenda, new listing agreements, anything like that they had you want to just throw a pitch out there and see if we can hit it?
I had one.
Okay, go ahead, Ramon.
Well, actually, I had two. I got 7 listings, and when I sent all the papers out, the one guy I thought I was going to have the most trouble with said, Ramon, don't even explain it. Just send it to me and I'll sign. So I did, and he signed. And the guy I thought would be the easiest doesn't want to sign. He says there's no benefit to it. And I said, well, there's no change from the agreement you and I have, which the addendum to the listing is exactly as our listing agreement is. And he goes, well, then there's no reason for me to sign this 2-page document. So there you have it.
Okay. All right. What'd you say, team? how do we tee this off better? If there's, I mean, if there was nothing that changed at all, there's no need for the new form. So something did change. What did change? Why do we need the form? I think is how we approach it. Anybody want to take a stab at what you would actually say? Let's keep the leadership out of it for just a sec, if that's okay, Mike and Rob, and just hold on for just see if anybody wants to come up to the mound and swing.
I mean, I can tell you what I said, but we'll wait.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Ramon. Let's hear how did you respond to that?
Well, I told him that this was due to the class action. He goes, "Oh, I understand that." And he goes, "There's nothing here that benefits me. We already have the agreement." And I said, "You are correct. Nothing is changing except that the NAR wants to make sure that you understand and all sellers understand that how the commission is being split up and that the commission is negotiable." He goes, "It was always negotiable." And I go, "Well, in a way, yes, but this is just to make sure that you and the buyers all understand exactly how the commission." He goes, "I fully understood it." And I said, "Okay." So I did call Kevin and he gave me an answer, which I won't say yet.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? What do you think?
I'll chime in.
Okay.
I signed a new buyer broker this morning, right before this meeting, and I signed a new listing. The listing I had already signed, but I did a flub up. So I had to do the amendment, and Rob helped me with that. I was kind of nervous because they're signing that they're going to be giving up to 3% commission for a buyer. And then they're signing at the same time when I put my other hat on and said, "Okay, now you're a buyer. Now we're going to sign this document." And I went through and explained everything. And she stopped and she said, she laughed and she said, "Why is it this has to be all spelled out?" And I said, "Well, this is the new requirement." But she was like, and we did come to a point where I said, "No, there may be a point where somebody comes in as on the south side, somebody comes in as an unrepresented buyer." Okay. And I explained to them how they may, they're going to need to sign something that says they're unrepresented. In that case, we're going to take this percentage. This is the percentage it's going to be. And she was, and I said, "It's not going to be this and this. It's going to be this or this." When I went through that section, the unrepresented or limited agency, and explained to her the benefit of having a buyer's agent. When we got to the third part where we put a 3%, I said, it's gonna help to have a buyer's agent involved, and we'd be paying up, you'd be paying up to 3%. And she was just like, "What? Everything's changed. Everything's different." And she kind of laughed about it, but she was more than happy. We got to the point where I said, then it'll be 5% if you do it this way. It'll be 6% if you do it this way. And she was just like, "Oh my gosh, you guys have so much to juggle now." And it was kind of enlightening to hear her response, because I thought she was going to be negative about it, but she's like, "No, this is good. I like this." It was really positive. It was good.
Interesting. All right, great. Is anyone dying to add to Ramon's case here and take it on? No? Reluctant? Okay. All right.
Well, I'm curious.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
With Ramon's scenario here, let's say his seller did not sign and refuse. Does that then make the listing agreement invalid? Like, is it officially canceled?
Good question. All right. So, man, hey, Rob, is it hard? Mike, is it hard to just not say anything? Like, it's
pretty easy for me.
Killing me, right? It's killing me. I mean, let's just get a running start at this, and you guys help me fill in here. First of all, we didn't just make new forms to make new forms to have everyone's processes be more challenging. The old world of sharing the MLS compensation is gone, as we know. The old form said it was going to be shared on the MLS. That's why we have to change it. Then we get to the next point, which is the compensation to the other agent cannot be greater than what they agreed to in the buyer broker agreement. So we had to change the language of being a blanket unilateral offering to up to. So we have this is the change. This is why we have new forms. This is the meat of it all. The offer of compensation has changed. So the next bullet point of discussion is now the brokers are going to individually with each listing make an offer of compensation in writing. This is think of the broker to broker compensation form. And now we need to make sure the seller is aware that when we do that individually on each transaction and put our obligation in writing, that the seller will stand behind us in that. So in one way we go, the seller, well, it hasn't changed in what they're paying. Sure. It's the mechanism in which it's being paid now has all changed. And that's a pretty big deal. Now there's how are we doing so far? Like that's the reason for the forums. Add on, guys.
Will, can I add something to that?
Please. Yes, please.
So, Ramon, where I'm hearing where our clients are saying, hey, there's no benefit to me. I would say there actually is a benefit. Not only what Will had said is, yes, we have to incorporate additional disclosures that in the contract things are negotiable. But the old listed agreement was a guaranteed compensation that was being paid. Whereas the current one, because we don't know what the buyer's agent is going to be, what buyer broker agreement they have, that's the reason why the up to language is so important, is now it's an up to percentage versus a guaranteed forced to pay. So it may seem like a subtle approach, but to the client, that little difference is a benefit to them.
And it opens the door for them to not have to pay as much to the buyer agent if that buyer and that agent did not contract, say, at a full 3%. So we just don't know what that is, So our job is look after our seller. There's an opportunity there that it may be less. I wouldn't oversell that too much.
I'm not trying to do that. It's just it's to at least explain the guarantee versus if they come in and only ask for 2. Then that seller ultimately has the potential of a savings. And I'm not trying to advocate to push the lower amount, but that's the difference.
Yep. And that's a good reason for our seller to sign. So, all right, Ramon, what did you say? We've got a lot more objections to handle. So let's put a bow on this one. But what did you say? How did you do?
Well, after talking to Kevin, I went back to him and said, legally, you do not have to sign. Basically, because what is written in this agreement is what you and I have already agreed to. His argument was on what Rob was saying on the variance. He goes, I could always negotiate commission. He says, if someone came in and said they wanted 4%, I can say no. So I am negotiating the commission. But the flat out answer was legally don't have to sign.
Yeah. You ever every once in a while we get someone who says, I gave them the form and they didn't sign it. What are we going to do at this point? Put a gun to their head? Rope them down?
Well, in answer to Sandy's question, she said, does that mean the listing is invalid? No. We still have a valid listing. This is an addendum to our listing agreement. So it's not, what it does is it doesn't modify the terms that we already have.
Yeah, until it's signed, it's not modified. So the old listing agreement would stay in place. Okay, let's move on. Let me give you guys one. I'm going to actually, because this is the new world. This is an objection from the listing agent. So let's put our buyer agent hats on right now. And this is what you're going to hear from potentially listing agents. So, and I'm kind of paraphrasing something I saw on, you guys, I've been following too many Facebook pages and hearing and copying the dialogue that's been going back and forth. This is how nuts this is right now. I'm just copying, conversations that are happening on Facebook that are interesting. And this is one from a listing agent on the Salt Lake Board of Realtors Facebook page. Quote, "Why should I care about the buyer's agent?" That's basically what he's saying.
Can I add something?
Please, Sally.
The question would be, do you care if your property sells?
Let's say they do. So let's go from there. Let's assume this listing agent does want the property to sell. Where do you go from there?
Then hope that they realize that agents are not altruists and they don't do it for free. And if you can't entice a buyer's agent to show your property, you have less likelihood of getting it sold in a timely manner.
Really good answer.
Good answer.
Anybody else? Come on, grab the mic, you guys. What would you say? This listing agent says, why should I care about the buyer's agent? Nobody? All right. Okay, I'll take it. Here,
I'll
you ready?
pitch in.
Yeah.
Natalie's got it.
All right, the Sold Sisters. Let's go.
Yeah. We are listing agents and buyer's agents. If we don't protect our industry and our commission, who's going to? Plus, if you want to work for your seller's best interests, you need to cast the widest net into the sea of buyers. And the way to do that is to offer the full 3% commission. If we offer less than 3%, those buyers aren't going to be able to afford your home because they have to pay closing costs, they have to pay down interest rates, and pay a realtor. So we need to be able to attract the most buyers by offering that full commission and protect our industry as a whole.
Sweet. Perfect. That was perfect. Hey, Joe, can you play the United States national anthem?
He gets a gold medal.
That is a gold medal answer. I love it.
That's my sister.
Yeah, you nailed it on that one. Let me give you a little spin to that one. All right. Why should I care about the buyer agent? The same reasons the seller should. And it's back to that casting the net. I really like how you said it's about casting the net to the buyers. I think at times we've said casting it out to the agent. I think the better thing to do is say the buyer pool has to deal with financing, closing costs, down other costs of the sale. So when we say, here's the buyer pool, look at this example. What happens when the rates go down? The buyer pool, right? The buyer pool increases, right? What happens when the rates go up? The buyer pool shrinks. What happens when we take on the cost of the purchase of the transaction? What happens to the buyer pool? It increases. Now, I think sometimes we've said agents. Now, I get they're tied together, but it's a better argument, I think, to look at it from the buyer pool and the buyer demographic. Because sometimes we think, I've heard these things about agents steering, to higher commit. Well, why would the agent just show it anyway? Don't they want what's best for the buyer? See, that's why don't walk into that trap. That's why it's better to say buyer pool than agent pool. Okay? Because there's a domino effect to that. By the way, this is a pet peeve of mine. The word steering is a horrible term that describes agents or anyone who directs or steers people to or away from neighborhoods based on racism. It was horrible practice in the 60s, 70s, and it took decades, right, for this horrible practice to die out. The plaintiff's attorneys did a great job of taking a horrible word and attaching it to agents steering people to properties at higher commissions. That's not steering. Steering isn't taking, but here we are, right? So I've said, if we ever want to talk about that, I would say directing, not steering. Steering is racism, and that's not steering. But I don't want us to buy off on their terminology, I guess is what I'm saying. Let's not give them any more credit than they already got for it, right? Anyway, it's better to say buyer pool than agent pool for that reason, okay? Because otherwise you find yourself arguing why agents would not show properties to their buyers because it matched what they're looking for. So I really, really like that. Let's take one that's similar to this. We could get a seller who says, I don't want to pay a buyer agent commission. Or do I have to pay a buyer agent commission? Now it's the seller Do I have to pay a buyer agent commission? I'm reading that I don't have to pay a buyer agent commission. So why would I want to do that? And do I have to? Anybody want to take that one on?
I think it goes back to what I'm not sure what her name is. I'm sorry, from the Soul Sisters, what she said so eloquently. It goes back to that. You don't have to pay the buyer's agent, but do you want to miss out on a large pool of buyers? And you're basically cutting yourself off at the knees if you don't, I think.
Nice. Great. Thanks, Leslie. Anybody else?
I wonder if we just start out by saying, like our first response or first sentence is, well, let's go over the benefits as to why it makes sense to.
Yeah, I love that.
Good.
Yes, I mean, that's a great segue of there is a lot of similarities of what we're having to talk about with the seller paying a buyer's agent commission as with a for sale by owner. Anyone that was wanting to sell the house on their own, they're always doing it trying to save the commission. So obviously no one wants to pay these fees, these commissions, what are out there if they don't have to. So it does go right back into it. Well, let's talk about why someone would offer. If what value, what benefits are they offering when they make those payments, when they list with an agent, or when they offer that buyer agent commission? It comes down to the value of what we believe is worth, and then what they're casting to be able to find, as Will said, more buyers so that they can actually move forward with the purchase.
Placing the buyer agent commission on the ledger of the seller allows the buyer to finance the cost of the transaction. That's what it allows. When we allow the buyer to finance the cost of the transaction, we increase the buyer pool and their ability to pay more, which is what we want, seller. Our objective is the highest possible net. So this is a very strategic move that is a benefit to our seller. Move that cost into the sales price. We increase the buyer pool and improve their ability to pay you more. That's why you want to pay a buyer agent commission. Now, we haven't even gotten into the job of the buyer agent. First of all, I think we should note that the job doesn't go away just because we didn't pay for it. Someone needs to hand hold the buyer, either customer or represented buyer. Everyone agree with that? There's still a huge job to do there, which is frankly why we put in 2.1a in the listing agreement, so that our listing agents can have this conversation about the additional time and effort it takes to work with a customer buyer, and that there's an additional fee for that because it's a big job. Okay, really good. All right, let me do another one here. Listing agent, you call a listing agent and they say, this was again from the Facebook group, buyer agent calls an agent, doesn't say what company. Good, thank goodness, it probably would have been pulled down if they would have said. But I happen to know the agent who was asking the question, and they said, can you tell me what the seller is offering on a compensation? And the agent said, quote, you'll have to write an offer and find out. Okay, what side do you want to be on first? You want to be on the listing side or the selling side? Let's try, or the buyer side. Let's try the buyer agent response first. What would you say to a listing agent who says you'll have to write an offer to find out?
Well, it may be a waste of our time.
Okay. Yeah, just cut right to the point. So it sounds like, okay, so, all right, good. Anybody else? I don't want to give all the answers here. I'd love to hear your input. What would you say, Sally?
So the seller doesn't want to sell his house. which is kind of paraphrasing, which was just said, or question perhaps he doesn't understand that always the asset has paid the buyer broker fee. And I think some of it comes to having to educate the sellers. And if it's a Salt Lake agent, I'm understanding a lot of them don't have the kind of education and training that we get from you guys.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I love Rachel's comment too. Oh, great. I'll put 3 then. Thank you.
Well, Will, I think it's a question that I posed and said you weren't in sales meeting on Tuesday, but it was a question I posed was, are there multiple offers? Because if there's multiple offers, I think that's an important question to ask, because then that's going to help me navigate how much I ask for because if the seller's not offering 3, but my buyer has agreed to pay me 3 as a Berkshire agent, the buyer's agreed to pay me 3 more than likely. And I know I'm walking into a multiple offer situation and I'm going to navigate that differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think unfortunately, we don't want our agents to become a purchaser in the real estate of our client, because that's kind of what we're implying here when we say, well, if it's a competitive offer situation, could my commission be the difference in my client getting the property? That should never be the case.
Right.
That should never be the case. We don't just go, oh, it's competitive, roll over and say, well, then I won't take a fee, or I'll take half a fee, or I'll take a lower fee. This is why those conversations with our buyers up front, including multiple offer potential, that we address this. But you're right. We need to light our path as best we can. Has anyone thought about this answer from the standpoint of what the UAR listing form looks like, and where it says authorization to share? So I guess I would ask this agent this question. So you said to write an offer and find out. Is that what the seller instructed you to do in your listing agreement? Is to say, no, don't communicate anything? Am I hearing you right? Or is this the agent just saying that? What I need to know is, what did the seller tell you in that section? That's what I'm asking for. And then at least I have part of the equation. So that's kind of where my head went. It was interesting to hear the banter of agents who were pretty upset. I think a lot of these, by the way, just social media, so I don't know that all of these posts or comments are what people really think. Sometimes I think they're just trying to get, shock and awe. So, but because it seemed, pretty bad pool here. That's going to really hurt our seller. All right, so here's a big takeaway. So let's go. It caused me to think about what should we do. That's a bad example. What's a good example? How about this? Hey, Ramon, call me and ask me about my listing, will you? I'm the listing agent. Let's have a role play. Go ahead and call me.
All right. Hello, Will.
Ramon, hey, how's things going over there at Berkshire Hathaway?
Oh, they're better than terrific. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. Hey, thanks for calling me. How can I help you, Ramon?
I want to show your property at 123 Main Street.
Sweet. Hey, that's great. When do you want to get in? I'll make it as easy as possible for you. When do you want to get in?
45 minutes from now.
Woo, 45. Okay. You know what? Let me see if I can make that happen. Thank you so much, Ramon, for calling me. You know what? If you give me just a second. All right, let's fast forward 5 minutes. I'm calling Ramon back. Hey, Ramon, it's Will. How are you?
Good.
Hey, good news.
Okay to see?
Yep, you're all set. 45 minutes. No problem. The seller will not be there. So confirm that for you. And hey, I'm going to see if I can run over there real quick and get the lights on. But hey, I just thank you. If you have any questions, will you please call me, text me? We are really, really, just really glad that you're going out of your way to show the property today. It means a lot to me and my seller. And good luck. And if there's any questions you have, let us know. Oh, and I'll tell you, in the back there, when you see the pool, we are going to have it open. All right. Don't worry about closing it. Just go ahead and leave it open. I'll take care of that later for you. Okay.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. And hey, by the way, if you haven't asked, but I'm going to tell you, our seller is authorizing up to 3% commission for the buyer's agent. So good luck with that. And we hope to see an offer.
All right.
All right. End of role play.
Will, the
Yes.
reason I didn't ask is I am going to be using the Lance May method of writing offers.
Okay.
And that is that 3% will be in every offer I write.
Great. I love it. Of course. If the listing agent offers it, awesome. Look, here's what I was trying to say here, and is that we should be look, we should thank our buyers agents. We should be accommodating. We should be a magnet of wanting to do deals together. We should be grateful and gracious with everyone who's going out of their way. There's going to be buyer agents calling these bozos that have these properties listed that are going to act like the agent calling is the enemy. So let's go the other way, bring all the offers, bring all the agents, increase the showings. That's what's best for our seller. There was a mentor of mine I looked up to in the mid 90s. I wonder if anybody knows this lady. Her name was Deanne Dinsley. She actually helped my mom buy properties when I was a teenager. Her son was my age. We went to Brighton High School together. And she, when I got into the real estate business, I remember calling her one day, wanting to show one of her listings. And she was so kind. She went out of her way. She thanked me over and over again, just said, Will, whatever happens, I'm grateful you showed it. And she was just so great. And I made a mental note of that I wanted to be more like her when I was on a listing side. And because it had a great effect on me. I wanted my buyer to buy that property, I would have been great if they bought Deanne's listing because I knew it would be a really good transaction together. Okay. All right. You guys want another one? Oh, let's talk about the listing agent says, send me a copy of your buyer broker agreement.
They don't have to do that. It's not required. However, once it goes under contract, we believe the buyer broker agreement should be included and sent to the title company.
So far in the Park City MLS form, so we'll just take that one. A lot of moving parts here, guys. And next week huddle, we'll have all kinds of new stuff too, because I'm aware of other changes that are in the oven right now. But to take a page, Sally, you're right. When we go to section 5 of this particular broker-to-broker agreement, the parties are acknowledging that a verification of the buyer broker agreement will be sent to the title company. That's what this MLS did. Now we have 5 MLSs in the state. So if you're not a part of the Park City MLS, don't worry. There's things coming soon. So I think you're right about that, but let's get a running start. Why is it problematic for a buyer's agent to arbitrarily just show and share the buyer broker agreement? Why is that a problem?
You're going against your fiduciary responsibility to your seller. But wait. I'm sorry. Buyer. To your buyer.
Yeah, to your buyer. Yeah. And one of those duties is confidentiality. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to share things that are confidential, what do I need from my client to do that?
Authorization.
I need authorization, and I need authorization in writing to do so. So I get too ahead of ourselves here, guys. I know there's a lot of moving targets. We've talked about this, but we're actually contemplating putting these written authorizations to share in a future version of the buyer broker agreement. But in the meantime, just get a text, get an email that says you're okay to share. Now let's talk about should we. Let's first put on our buyer hat and ask, should we share? Is it beneficial for our buyer client and for us as an agent to share a copy of the buyer broker agreement? What do you think about that? Is it harmful? Is it helpful? What do you think?
It gives the seller an opening to not pay the buyer's agent if the buyer broker agreement shows that the buyer is willing to pay it, if the seller won't, which disadvantages the buyer.
But the buyer can't pay or I mean, the listing agent can't pay more than what the buyer agency agreement states. He can't get more. So
Right,
if the buyer's agency agreement says 2%, that's all he's getting, even if the seller's offering 3%.
I don't think that's accurate. I think
Yeah.
they can get that extra 1%. Can they, Will?
Mm-mm.
No, they
Well,
can't?
not from another source,
Yeah.
but okay, back up. They'd have to modify the buyer broker agreement. Julie, you had a hand up. Let's go. Let's keep getting the comments, and then we'll get to the conclusion. Julie Livers, go ahead.
Yes. So my question is, so, I mean, obviously when I am doing the buyer broker agreement with my clients, I'm going to have, the 3% in it. But so for these agents that, let's say, do have the 2%, if they call and I say, oh, my, seller's willing to pay up to 3%, what's to make it so that they would not rip up their broker agreement they have with their client and rewrite it for a 3%?
Technically nothing. But to be clear, the buyer has to agree to that. So the buyer and the broker have to re-agree to terms and modify those terms. So, that's this conversation with the buyer that they would have to do that. We're not in a position to say buyer and broker or any parties to a contract are somehow restricted legally to modify their terms. We can't do this. I like what Rob said. This is America. It's like it'd be a violation of a constitutional right for have parties not be able to modify their agreement. Right now, this could be very suspicious as far as the workaround in the industry. But if the buyer, the principal, says in writing that I'm willing to put myself on the line and obligate myself as the buyer, the principal in the transaction, in the agreement to another 1%, they have a right to do that.
Yeah, but they would do that just for that particular property.
Maybe they would.
They wouldn't just hang themselves for, if that deal doesn't happen, oh, we're now up to 3% on everything.
And maybe they would.
Well, maybe. If you were Heidi Ingram, you could get them to do it.
We'll put a little twist on this and talk about incentives like commissions over 3 in a minute. But let's talk about this, whether we should share the buyer broker agreement as a strategy to represent our buyer. Is it harmful? Is it hurtful? Anybody else have, how do you feel about that? Anyone want to share an opinion? You represent the buyer. Is it harmful or hurtful? I said, is it harmful or hurtful? Hey,
I think in most cases it could.
Tails I win, heads you lose.
I mean,
what harmful and what helpful?
Is it helpful or harmful? That's the right answer. So
from the buyer's point of view,
yeah.
Let's say each percentage was $25,000. If he can save the seller $25,000, it would be helpful for the buyer because he's saving 25% supposedly for the listing agent or the seller.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting as we're talking about this, all those addendums we sent for the listing agreement, we talked about unrepresented and we talked about limited.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about if the buyer broker comes in with a lower percentage. That wasn't ever discussed. I guess it was when we say the listing agent's number is 3%. I guess it can't go up. So never mind.
Yep.
So
it ends up being a positive to the seller because they can't pay more than that number. All right. Before we put a bow on this one, any other comments? Heidi, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Ramon brought up a point that he doesn't really, he cares about the buyer broker agreement and the percentage compensation, but he also said that he's going to include that in all of his REPSIs. He's going to negotiate that 3%. Do we have language for that yet? Have we kind of thought about that?
Yeah, so you have, if you're going to write it in the offer and just skip the broker to broker altogether, then that's one of Rob's favorite forms, right, Rob? That it's been out for a while, but misunderstood.
Unfortunately, I mean, even that right now has a little bit of challenges because
it does.
So we're trying to, Mark, we're working on an updated version for that right now too. So
we're talking about real estate compensation. There it is. This has been out for a while, but it has the language in it. Yeah, but it's an addendum. It would attach to the Rep C. This is prior to Attorney General approving a new section of the Rep C. But it does have, this payment shall be made in addition to any other compensation. So if we don't have a broker to broker agreement, then there isn't any additional compensation made. So it can be a little confusing or ambiguous. What we're suggesting is language like this. For clarify, so I would have this language that says when I write an offer, I'm just going straight into the offer. I'm not calling the agent asking what they are offering, if that's the play. Seller agrees to pay 3% of the purchase price of the buyer's brokerage. This payment shall be made in addition to any other compensation agreed to by the seller's brokers, if applicable. The escrow office is authorized and directed to withhold this payment from seller's proceeds at closing. The provisions of this section will survive closing. Here's the additional language. For clarification purposes, there is no additional compensation. Therefore, the total amount of compensation is 3%. And then in the future, it might say 4.3E does not apply. And this is all moving targets. So when you need help, call and we'll walk you through it if that's what you're deciding to do. The broker to broker compensation form is changing right now. And we're adding language to that right now that we can use. The only red flag on the broker to broker compensation was from the listing side out, not from the buyer side being received. So if you're writing an offer and you want to get a broker to broker compensation agreement for 3%, you're fine to do so. And since you're the one, initiating the offer being written, I think that would be a good way to approach it. Now, we still haven't answered this buyer broker thing. I think these all tie together. Here's how I'm seeing it. So I think how we're seeing it. When we had the MLS being the compensation, then we didn't see ourselves negotiating the commission inside of offers very often. I mean, it was very rare to see that happen. If I send over the buyer broker agreement with a written permission from my buyer, I'm proving to the listing side and to the seller with my offer that I have contracted at 3%. And I'm sending over the broker to broker compensation, which mirrors my buyer broker agreement. What I'm hoping that does, which I think it has a better chance of, putting a pin in my commission and sticking it up here, and that's taken care of. All right, here's my buyer agreement. No questions about it. No guessing about what it is. Here's the broker to broker compensation. 3%, 3%. All right, stick that over here. Now let's talking about sales price and other concessions that might be made in the offer. In other words, let's leave commissions alone because it's dealt with. I think that's probably the better play. So back to this question, is it harmful or helpful to send the buyer broker agreement? I think it's helpful for the buyer agent to do so because of that reason. Okay. Now remember, buyers are paying commissions inside these. That's the reason. Remember the buyer pool analogy? The buyer hires the buyer agent. That's a cost. The buyer hires the buyer agent. That's a cost. That cost is being placed in the sales price in order to expand the buyer pool. Right? Expand the buyer pool. So it doesn't show up as a cash burden to our buyer. That's why it's placed in the sales price. So we want the seller to offer it. We want the seller to pay for it on their ledger. And that's a mechanism I'm hoping that will keep the buyer agents out of every time there's a counter, there's some kind of, target on your commission every single time. So I think that's the better play. There's been a lot of debate right now in the industry about broker to broker compensation, about whether we even want the territory because we've been holding on to it. Some states have dropped it entirely. And if you go and write an offer right now and you don't do broker to broker, you're skipping over broker to broker, going right to seller, which is the addendum that we just talked about. right? But I think the reason to hang on to the territory is for what I just said. It's just one perspective. It's just one aspect, right? It's a lot more complicated than it's been. I understand. It was a lot more transparent the other way. It was a lot more simplified the other way. But there is some logic in sending the buyer broker agreement over, showing, unless there's other confidential terms, by the way, which I don't know what those would be, but I'm showing them that it's 3, and then I get the broker to broker compensation, and that aspect is done. All right. Hoping that that's the case. All right. Any other comments about that to that point?
Well, I have a comment.
Yeah.
So there's a scenario that's been running through my mind only because down here in Cache Valley, we had our board luncheon yesterday and it got brought up. So let's say as the buyer's agent, you have the buyer broker compensation at 2.5%. You find out from the listing agent that they're offering up to 3%. What if that buyer and buyer's agent have agreed to that if there was going to be higher than the agreement offered compensation, that they wanted to take that additional 0.5% and have it be part of their closing costs, concessions, or a credit back towards the buyer?
Mm-hmm. Oh, back to the buyer?
Mm-hmm. But
well, I thought you were going to say back to the agent.
No, nope.
Okay.
Back to the buyer.
Well, that I guess theoretically could be done in the sales price, or it could be a concession towards closing costs. So we could write, closing costs. So here's my compensation, and then on an addendum, I'm going to write closing costs to be, seller's contribution of buyer's closing costs to be, and then whatever that number is, whatever that 0.5 number is. That could be one way to handle it. That's up to the buyer's agent. So that's one way to do it. I don't want to put that in I don't think we want to put that in our buyer broker agreements that way. Otherwise we could be handcuffing our buyer's agents. Every deal is so unique and so different that we wouldn't want to do it there. Where I actually thought you were going, Sandy, is that you're going to say now the buyer agent wants the additional 0.5%. So they say up to 3, but the buyer broker agreement is at 2.5. And now the buyer agent's going, well, what are we doing with this other half? It is a commission. And okay, so let's do this. Let's add on to that question and now make it additional commission above 3. We have some builder developers right now who are really going after this buyer pool and saying we're offering 4%. Well, a lot of these buyer broker agreements are going to be at 3. So much like this, the 2.5 and the 3, whether it's 2.5 and 3 or 3 and 4, we still have the fundamentally same problem, don't we? So how would you guys address that?
Hey, Will.
Hey, Bronson.
How you doing? Great discussion, by the way.
Thanks.
And I guess my thought process is why are we getting so entangled into the compensation before we're even writing the offer, right? We now have a mechanism where we're going to negotiate compensation in the REPC with the addendum and eventually the actual REPC, right? So why are we getting so entangled in this on the front end of things where this, at the end of the day, should be handled? That's in our client's best interest. When we're representing a buyer, it's in our seller's best interest. When I guess what I'm saying is I don't know why we're trying to tackle this on the front end of things when, ultimately we should be showing our clients all available properties, that are available to them, get as much information regarding what the compensation is going to be on the front end of things. But at the end of the day, we can negotiate this as a part of the contract, and I think that would be best practice for all of us to do. So, and maybe help me see otherwise, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really good perspective. With every case being a little bit different, I think we're just for whatever reason, it's not the preferred reason to tackle it this way, but just one of the things that we'll need to tackle. So if you go at it from let's just show all the properties, and when we go to write an offer, having that language in section 4 of the REPC kind of does exactly what Bronson's just talking about. Like, we're not even going to really bring it up until we write the offer, and we're bringing it up in that section. And it's just like filling out anything else. What price do you want to offer? What other terms do you know? And the commission is just one of those terms that we frankly already agreed to in the buyer broker agreement.
Yeah, and
I do have one thing that might be able to answer that, Bronson, where it could depend if we've had a conversation up front with our client and our client has made it clear to us. Let's say that, hey, I don't have the ability to pay any additional commission compensation or any of the compensation. The only way I can buy a property is if the seller is willing to do that. And if our client, our buyer, has instructed us, I don't even want to see a property if they're unwilling to be willing to pay the compensation that's going to be owed. And so if they ask us in advance to say, here, check first to find out if they're willing to do that, if they're willing to be open to the idea of paying the compensation before we see the property, if they've instructed us to do this, then that's where I would say it would probably make sense. Otherwise, what you've said is spot on.
The PMCC for Clark, and I needed to call his wife to go over his meds. I'm going to take my.
I got it.
Thanks, Will. Hey, Rob, I 100% agree, right? When I call to schedule a showing, there's going to be a conversation up front about compensation, right? And helping understand that part of it. And if they say, hey, my seller is absolutely unwilling to pay a commission, then I have to sit down with my buyer and have that conversation. Look, you've agreed to pay me 3%. The seller of this property has said flat out they are not willing to pay a commission. Do you still want to see the property? And then you ultimately react accordingly, right?
Agreed.
And if a listing agent said, hey, I want to see a copy of your buyer broker agreement, at the end of the day, it's completely irrelevant, right? Like, hey, that's an agreement I have with my buyer. Do you want me to show the listing or not? Right. And you know, help me understand what the seller is ultimately offering. And what I will tell you is that I'm not going to share the agreement, but I've got my compensation is 3%, and I'm going to ultimately have to start the process at that, and and we will ultimately negotiate the commission as a part of the offer if they choose to make an offer.
Love it. Bronson, thank you so much for raising this. I just realized we're talking about two different things entirely. So, okay. And if you wouldn't have asked, I would have thought we were all on the same page, but you're bringing up really two different issues. Let me start off with listing agents have no obligation to verify buyer broker agreements or showing agreements prior to showings. None. It's not the brokerage or the agent's responsibility to police whether or not a showing agreement or a buyer broker agreement has been executed or signed prior to a showing. So in the timeline, so Bronson's point is dead on. We don't need to be tackling all these commission issues at the showing phase at all. That's we're not going to go work all that out, say, before we go show it. I think there was some idea out there that I'm not going to show a house until I have all the commission issues agreed to. That's not practical and really not the advice we're giving. When we change the timeline to I'm submitting an offer, I like delivering the buyer broker agreement. I like having the compensation broker to broker. If you want to go that way, you can certainly just put it in the offer. Just write it in. It's not there now. You have to use an addendum to do it. So you're going to have some form there. You can do one or two ways. And we'll see how this all shakes out as what's best. But one thing I like about broker to broker is it tends to put a pin in the discussion of commission and separate it. Okay, because it's remember the broker to broker compensation. Who are the parties? Who are the parties? Each broker, right? And who are the parties to the REPC? Buyer and seller. Now we have them acknowledge it as by way of receipt, but they're not the ones agreeing to the terms. That's interesting, right? That's the closest thing we have to the MLS form of compensation is the broker to broker compensation. And to be clear, like I'm not trying to sell a form, I get no royalties on the broker to broker compensation form. No, I'm not trying to, sell a form. What I'm trying to do is say, if I'm on the buyer side and I want to protect my commission, that might be one of the better ways to do it. It's not the only way, but it might be a better way. And I could see that because we're getting agents being asked, can you send me over a copy of your buyer broker agreement? Well, not prior to showing. There's no reason to do that. But with an offer, I could see a reason to do that with an offer and with written permission from the buyer.
Will,
Yeah.
this is Jason.
Hey, Jay.
Can that be put into an addendum? What if the listing agent put this into a counter addendum saying buyer and seller agreeing that the buyer has to show buyer broker agreement to make this contract valid? Can that happen?
If it's a material point for your seller, it's not saying it can't happen, but we have to have written permission from the principal of that contract to share it. We just can't just share it. We have to get permission from the buyer to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, well, wouldn't the Rep C supersede the compensation agreement?
It can. And that's what the Park City form has. And, we're kind of dancing around a little bit because half the company is Park City based and the other half is not. But in section 4 of the broker agreement in Park City, it says changes to the fee in the Rep C. It addresses it. Right. So, and this is the language that we needed. We first saw this back, on the 23rd of July was, wow. I think the forms committee will eventually add something like that. But where we are today is Mark is working on that. As soon as he's finished, Rob and I and a few others are going to put some eyes to this. And I think we're going to have a new broker to broker compensation form. That way, if the Rep C wants to address compensation inside of it simultaneously while there's a broker to broker agreement, we need to have language that clarifies what controls. So technically, yes, Bronson, you're right, that it can. You have to mark a box technically on whether it does. All right, can you believe that is already an hour? I cannot believe that is the fastest hour of the whole day. So there's a lot more to come. Can I give you a couple of really good takeaways real quick? I'm gonna fly through them really quickly. Okay. So a couple of reminders. Let's make sure that we treat buyer agents really well. Thank them for showings. Let's go the other way and be as accommodating as we can. Remember, terms of the buyer broker agreement are confidential unless we have written permission to share. Be patient with the agents who don't have the training. You may have to hold their hand and guide them along. And let's be the example. Let's make sure our integrity is on display. Open houses. What's different about an open house today? It's a great place to build rapport right now. The building rapport during showings without community commitment was where we built rapport with potential buyers prior to this world. Now open houses are an amazing place to do that. So we may want to ramp up how often we hold an open house. By the way, still no showing agreements for for anything other than Washington County MLS. No showing agreements yet. Have not seen one out. We still have this understanding that they've been licensed, but we do not have. They're not out yet. So it's buyer broker agreements, which is preferred anyway. And remember, you cannot show a property without that. I have a couple other objections I'll share for next week that were comments found on the Facebook, but boy, they're kind of I couldn't talk about it in 1 minute. It'll get everyone fired up. So we'll save that for next huddle. In the meantime, on behalf of everybody, all of us, we love you guys. And wait, do you want a good dad joke? You want a good dad joke going away? There you go. Hold on, I got to look it up really quick. I liked it, and then let me just look it up. Hold just 1 second. Okay. Do you know dogs can't operate MRI machines? I didn't know that. Did you know that dogs can't operate MRI machines, but cats can? But cats can. Go tell your kids and your grandkids. I hope they get a laugh out of that one. But that one might require a more adult mind. Maybe that's more for our high schoolers or something. Anyway, love you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Call us anytime with questions. We're happy to help. We got this, right? All right. Love you all. Thanks, Scott.